I'm glad to hear you're doing better than you were on Monday.
Oh, Monday was terrible. My parents were even a little scared. My dad was joking around. He was like, I don't know. He seems kind of out of it. Maybe we should just put him down.
You know, it's so funny. I can picture your dad saying those exact words.
Yeah, right? All right. Well, on that dark note, should we get into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Hello, welcome to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch movies and talk about them and talk about why they could have been better and ideas for how they could have been better. I am joined, as always, by my very good friend, Andrew D. Young, from across the country in Ontario.
Yeah, all the way from BC to Ontario. Always lovely to be here.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's always good. We just spent the before time catching up, and now we're going to spend some time talking about a movie that I really like a lot, actually.
I actually found I really enjoyed watching it, too. I think this, you know, it's interesting because you mentioned doing this one, and I remember my memory of watching it in the theater when it came out was that it was good. I enjoyed it, but I remember leaving the theater going, something felt like it could have, something wasn't quite connecting. However, I enjoyed watching it again. I was never bored. I never had any moments where I went like, I cringed and went, ugh, why did they put that in there?
I felt the exact same way. We're talking about Brave, obviously, because
on the title card. I don't know if I said that.
It'll be on the title card
okay.
because, with our terrible paint aesthetic, which I absolutely love.
Oh, it's the best.
It's the best. I mean, you drew the heads, but like I just love doing like where it's like purposefully in paint. Mm-hmm. Like looks terrible. I love it. It's so terrible.
Do you actually use Microsoft Paint?
Yeah. I purposely. I could use like a video editing software and make like little animations and whatnot. Mm. But I purposefully use MS Paint for the title cards because I think it's got this like hokey aesthetic that I really like.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this week we were doing Brave, the Pixar movie,
the one and only Disney Pixar princess movie.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, you were about to say something about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I remember like loving this movie. I still love this movie. I actually think it, apart from some technical issues, I left the theater feeling the same way. I saw this in theaters in 2012, and I left the theaters feeling like I really enjoyed it, but that there was something off. And I only now, when I was writing my pitch, I think I figured out what it was, and I'll talk about that when we get to my pitch. But I do think that this movie suffers from, like, I guess, I don't know what you'd call this, but like a sandwich problem. Okay. Because it's, in terms of its release schedule, 2012 happens to be right in between two monster Disney princess movies, which was Tangled in 2010, which is amazing, and then 2013 was the powerhouse that we know, which caused now a franchise, which is Frozen. Right. And so I do think that Brave, as a classic kind of Disney princess movie, even though it's done by Pixar instead of the regular Disney animation studio, does kind of get lost between those two amazing movies, Tangled and Frozen.
That's interesting. I actually hadn't considered that as a factor, because you're right. Yeah, I guess the sandwich would be a good way to explain it.
Yeah, I don't know what else you'd call that. Like, it's both overshadowed and I don't know what you'd call that. Like, it's predecessor and antecedent, whatever the words are.
Yeah,
are both amazing. So it just gets lost a little bit.
Right. Well, what's interesting is, I mean, now that you've said that, I mean, it feels like it almost could have been, in order to have maybe properly distinguished itself as a princess movie, it could have been, I think, maybe like an anti-princess movie, where it really goes against, where it went more against what some of the tropes would have been. kind of like, I guess, what Shrek did with that classic fairy tale, and it took it and it basically just almost did a parody of it. Not that this needed to be a parody, but...
it does deconstruct a lot of them, but Disney in general has been moving in that direction.
Frozen did that too, actually, I think.
Frozen, and even Tangled, even The Princess and the Frog has like a lot, like the fact that Tiana in The Princess and the Frog, like the only way, I really like the ending of that movie, because the only way that the spell can be broken is if she like gets kissed by a princess or something like that, or gets kissed by a prince. I can't remember what it is. But then when they get married and they kiss, she's now a princess, and so the spell is broken. It's like, oh, like I like how they keep finding like clever loopholes. Or in Frozen, they do something quite similar where they're like, you can break the curse with an act of true love, which comes from Anna herself doing the act of true love to save someone else, as opposed to someone doing an act of true love for her or to her, like kiss. Like, I don't know. I thought that was really, really excellent. Like, it's sisterly love that wins out. And I do think that Brave in general is a movie that is about the love between a mother and a daughter. That's what this movie is about.
Yeah, exactly.
Or that relationship.
So going back to what sort of I think what one of the issues for me is it wasn't quite, I think thematically it was a little messy, in that it's, on one hand, it's in its introduction, it's talking a lot about fate.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a question of like, okay, wait, is this a movie about fate? Is this a movie of be careful what you wish for? Or is it about like pride and how that affects, a mother-daughter relationship?
Yeah. And that's why when I was writing my pitch, I came to the conclusion that the reason I always have had this weird feeling about this movie, I actually wrote it out because I felt so strongly about it, is that the movie, is about fate and like what your, I guess, destiny is, depending on how you want to talk about fate. But the first two characters that are introduced are Merida and Eleanor, and they're both like, so we can see like that's sort of the crux of the story is built around this. But the narrative problem that I had was that the movie sort of has two main themes that are actually in narrative dissonance from one another.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that the main themes are, I didn't think it was so much as fate, so much as like you could change your destiny, right? Same idea, but like it's about, knowing who you are, what your fate is, right? And then this is contrasted, I think, and actually not even juxtaposed, like directly in conflict with the other theme, which is pride. Mm-hmm. And so when Merida stands up for what she believes in, which is she wants the right to choose who she'll marry and how that affects her life and what her destiny is, what her fate is, she actually winds up upsetting her mom because it's pride. Mm-hmm. And so we often see this trope or theme come back in the movie where Merida says, like, this is what happened, but it's not my fault. Right? Like, what does she say? Like, this witch gave me a cake and I fed it to mum and she turned into a bear and it's not my fault. and you're like, okay. So we keep coming back to, and it really, Eleanor only changes back into a human being when Merida takes on that responsibility. When she says, like, I love you, you've always been there for me. Mm-hmm. And like, so we see her giving up her pride. The problem I have with this is that I mean, you could argue that, yeah, pride is a part of it, but what Merida is doing might spit in the face of tradition, but she's standing up for what she believes in. And I feel like the movie is saying, like, if you stand up for what you believe in, that's pride. If you spit in the face of tradition, that's your pride, and that could cause like kingdoms to fall and be in ruin. Now, in the end, there's a scene where where Merida talks about, where she's talking in front of the clans, and how and then her mother signs to her, like, we're going to break tradition, and she doesn't have to get married. But that sort of happens circumstantially. Yeah, exactly. It's not what the theme is about. And so these two themes that run parallel to each other are actually in conflict, in my opinion. Yeah. I think you've actually managed to explain it in a way that's much more to the point than I would have been able to. Because I think you're right. And to put it in those terms, that they're themes that are in conflict with each other.
Well, let's talk about what we thought worked. What for you in terms of, because you said that you really enjoyed it. What was it about the movie that you actually really connected with?
I actually only have one bad thing, but I'll do the good first.
Okay.
Other than the theming thing that I just talked about, I only have one bad thing that I wrote down while I was watching, not even pitching. I'll do the good first. Merida's hair is the greatest thing ever. I love Merida's hair, and I think they spent so much time animating that, and it looks gorgeous. And when it's wet from the rain or from playing with her mom in the river, it's just like first of all, I just have a thing for red hair, and second of all, I just want to express like the monster of an animation job that must have been.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, to get it wet, to get it to flow, to get it to move. It's fantastic. I just want to throw that out there. I think the characters, this movie really shines as like almost like a character comedy. Like every character is three-dimensional for the most part and is funny as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I gotta tell a story, an anecdote, because I agree with my dad. Billy Connolly, who's the actor who plays Fergus, Merida's father. My dad, this is the last movie my dad went and saw in theaters back in 2012. My dad hasn't been to see a movie in theaters since Brave.
No.
And my mom and dad came home from the theater, and my mom was like, she was like almost embarrassed. And I was like, what happened? And she's like, we went to go see this movie in theaters, because dad really likes animated. It's like the only movies he'll watch. She's like, we went to go see this movie in theaters. And dad is a huge fan of Billy Connolly as a comedian. And apparently he was like in the theater crying tears of laughter as Billy Connolly was like doing his bits and whatnot. Like, just dying in his seat. And my mom was like, are you okay? Like, he's just like tears down his face, dying because of Billy Connolly. But the cast is amazing. Everyone does a great job. Like, it's basically just the cast of Harry Potter. Like, I just want to throw
you're right.
Like, Kelly MacDonald, who plays Merida, is the Grey Lady from Harry Potter.
Right.
Emma Thompson, who plays Professor Trelawney.
Is Billy Connolly in Harry Potter?
No, Billy Connolly is not in Harry Potter, unfortunately. But Julie Walters, who plays the witch, is Molly Weasley. Who else am I missing? Robbie Coltrane, who plays Dingwall, Lord Dingwall. He plays Hagrid.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, like, there's a bunch of them in there. But every character is hilarious. Like, I couldn't help but feel like they were all hilarious. But the only really two characters who drive the plot forward are Merida and Eleanor, her mother.
Yeah.
And that works fine. Fergus, to some extent, Billy Connolly, to some extent, drive the plot forward. But, like, really, they all feel like bits. And I think that works really, really well. And that's why I have such a good time with this movie. The soundtrack is amazing.
The music is amazing. It is great. Yeah, I agree.
I love the band. Whenever they're fighting, the band just keeps playing, even when one of them gets knocked out. Like, they just keep playing the fight. There's a scene where Merida is shooting the arrows, and she's like she fires one after the other, and she gets to the last one, and like almost like time slows down, and it's just the music, and like we can see her mother is like in the distance, like walking towards the camera while she's gonna fire the arrow, and all of it, like as she looses the arrow and we see it hit, all of a sudden, like the sound and time come back together, and it's like, and she's like face to face with her mother. And I have to say, the sound design and music during that one scene I thought was particularly good. It's such a dramatic moment, and I think everything was working well in that particular spot. The theme for the Wisps, whenever the Wisps are on screen, they have this gorgeous chordal, I don't want to say melody because it's not really a melody, chordal harmony that goes through the piano. Gorgeous. Everything that the witch says, the crafty woodcarver, when they have the whole voicemail thing with the potions, and she's just like, if you're that redheaded lady, pour, that redheaded lass, pour vial number 2. If you'd like to speak to a live homunculus, like, I want to speak to a live homunculus. I just love that. I gave him a potion to change his fate, and he made off with an especially nice mahogany cheese board. These lines were amazing. So those are all my goods. The only bad that I have about this movie isn't even really a bad so much as just my thoughts. And I think based on how good the soundtrack and music is in this movie, I think it should have been a musical.
Oh, that's so funny.
Maybe it's just because we're on musical themes because we did Dream Theater last week, but I have to say, like, I think the songs and the way that they're sung, like, they have some amazing artists. Mumford and Sons helped do some bits and pieces of this, and some other Celtic singers, and there's some... I mean, why not? Why not make it a musical?
Well, it has in, I guess, sort of the vein of a Disney princess movie. Yeah, I mean, it almost does warrant that to some extent.
And there's two songs. There's the song that Merida, well, she doesn't sing, but that's going on in the background while she's like having her day off and she's climbing the firefalls. Like, that almost feels like she should be singing it anyway. Like, I will run, I will fly,
right,
chase the wind and touch the sky. And then the other song that when she and her mother are doing that montage in the creek or river, if you want to get technical, I guess. Yeah. And it's like I can't remember the melody for that one, but This Love is a Fire. So it's it's a good one. But yeah, anyway, I want to hear your goods and bads.
Actually, I mean, mine are pretty similar to yours. The notes I had were the music, definitely. I thought the music was spectacular. I thought the mother-daughter relationship was I thought that was a really strong. It was a good thing to focus on, and I thought it worked. Like, I actually really believed the tension between the two of them. My next one says, I think most of it worked. So I guess I do think most of the pieces either were there and were working in unison with each other. I put another note, the characters were interesting, and because I really enjoyed, like, one of my favorite scenes is when they're gonna do before the tournament, and she's sitting on the throne next to her parents, and then all the clans come forward and like, this is my son, and and the one guy, the first guy who comes forward, who's like the guy with like the longer hair.
Oh, he's the son of Lord MacGuffin.
Yeah, and I also loved that they called him Lord MacGuffin. I thought that was hilarious. But there's this moment where he stands forward and he's posing, and then he's like, his pecs start flexing, and it just cracked me up. It just cracked me up. But there's like little things like that throughout it, which are trademarks, I would say, of a Pixar movie, like little gags that
but every character gets one. Like, it's like every character is fun.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I said, like, because sometimes one of the things for me where if I find an animated movie hard to watch, it's because there will be gags where I'm cringing and I'm like, why did they think that was funny? That was just not funny. But I don't remember there being a single moment like that in this. I was laughing. I was genuinely laughing throughout the whole movie.
This movie is so hilarious.
It is
just so funny. You remember when we talked about Atlantis and we talked about how every one of those characters felt like like they had motivations and stuff like that. Now, we thought that would make a better TV show, and I stand by that statement. But I think this actually works as a movie, and every character has like gags and is funny, and it works. It works so well.
Yeah. Or like the three brothers. That was a clever little,
Oh, so funny.
And the way that they cause mischief. And then with the witch and the crow. This random crow that can talk.
This is your crow that can talk. Like, but it was just fun.
Yeah, exactly. There were like most of it I felt like worked. The things where I felt that didn't work, I just felt there were some things like what you talked about. The theme, there were two themes that were in conflict with each other. And I also felt like the whole subplot with the demon bear I felt it didn't quite connect.
How so?
So in this sense, I think you could have taken that element out of the story and it would not have affected the mother-daughter relationship.
You mean like Mordieu in general?
Specifically that character. The bear, like the turning into the bear, that was a central part of the story, but the whole backstory of there were these four kingdoms and one of them, fell.
One of the four sons decided he wanted to. Yeah,
exactly. I don't think that story really had any bearing on the decisions Merida made.
It's about pride. I mean, you're not wrong. It's just basically a thing about pride. But you easily could have had, like, that not been a thing and still had Mordieu, but not as a character. Just leave him as a bear.
Yeah.
Sort of a force of nature.
Exactly. Like
I think the point of it was basically just to, like, drive home the theme of pride.
And I think maybe it would have worked more if maybe that was more of the focus. But so in my pitch, I took that character out altogether, and I actually don't think you need that character to begin with. So that was my only other real note in terms of, like, as I was thinking about it, like, how would I have changed this? I just felt like, I mean, I thought it was an interesting character. I thought it was an interesting concept. I just felt like, in terms of the relationship between the mother-daughter, it didn't really do any beyond the mother protecting her daughter at the end.
It feels like Mordieu could have been a force of nature without the added layer.
Yeah, exactly.
Like classic man versus nature. I do have to say, like, I know you haven't even gotten your pitch yet, but I do have to say that I think it would be interesting if you kept that whole subplot with the four kings' sons or four kings in, but you left it as, like, sort of a hidden detail.
Right. Yeah.
Like, for those who are paying attention, you could be like, oh shit, like actually one of the four kings is Mordieu, and when he and when they, like, I don't know, I think it's also implied that Mordieu is also the wisps, like, but I don't know, I think it would have been, if you were cool, if, like, oh, like, that whole story about the four kings was actually connected to Mordieu, but it's not explicitly told, like, it's for those who are paying attention.
Yeah, well, actually, that would have been a really interesting way to do that.
Like, tell the whole story the way it is, but, like, at the end, when everything goes away and they kill Mordieu, it's like, you know, if you were paying attention, you'd know that because it's almost like, you almost don't even have to say it, but, like, the symbol on the ring is the same as the symbol on the archway.
Yeah.
And, like, then when they go to see the four kings, and then Mordieu shows up in where the four kings are, like, you could have not even said anything, and then everyone would have just been like, oh, like, the fact that there was a man who wanted the strength of 10 men saw the wood carver, and the wood carver, we already know, does everything bear oriented. So that's almost a straight giveaway. Eleanor gets turned into a bear. Mordieu gets turned into a bear. But it's never explicitly said. Like, it's there for you to, like, pick up.
Yeah, I just feel like if you're gonna introduce a monster in the context of, like, a fable, that monster needs to exist to effectively be, like, the guardian of the cave that the hero has to journey into and confront.
You're talking about, like, the hero's journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I feel like, just in order to really justify a character like that, they have to act as something that stands in the way of the character really getting what they want. And in this case, I think what Merida wants is her independence. And so it's over the course of the story, it changes so that she wants to turn her mother back into a human. So the existence of the demon bear, I forgot his how is it pronounced? Mordieu, yeah. I was about to say Moriarty, but that's a different
kind of bear.
Yeah. But I feel like in order to justify the existence of that character, Merida would have to, like, had to confront that bear in order to have solved the problem, instead of it being this thing that they come upon and then have to escape.
Yeah. It's interesting in terms of backstory, but you're right, it isn't really... The bear doesn't guard anything, really.
Yeah, exactly.
It mostly just sets up Fergus as being the Bear King, and sets up the wood carver, and sort of drives home the idea of pride.
Exactly.
Other than that, it doesn't... Yeah, you're right. It doesn't really actually guard anything in terms of, like, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell.
Exactly. So I'm thinking, like, a classic example where that has worked really well is in the case of The Hobbit. So you have Smaug, the dragon, and Smaug represents, in the context of that story, basically embodies greed, so that is really what the antagonist of The Hobbit is. It's greed.
Yeah, it's not what's his fuck the Defiler.
Yeah,
Azog.
Azog, yeah, exactly.
I one day we're gonna do The Hobbit, and
when I talk about The Hobbit, I'm talking about the original book.
I know what you mean. Yeah, like the point of that is they want something in the cave. They want the Arkenstone. I'm going with the movie anyway. They want the Arkenstone, and Smaug represents however you want to pronounce it, represents like the guardian of what they're trying to get. But on top of that, thematically, he also represents greed.
Exactly.
Right? That is dragon sickness is greed. In the case of Brave, we wind up with Mor'du, who represents pride, but he doesn't guard anything explicitly.
Exactly. Like he thematically it fits, but in terms of being there as a way to actually confront the character and force the character to really confront herself, it doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't really add to that.
Yeah, it does make for a cool battle.
It does. It definitely does. I
will say that Mor'du is the second most metal bear in animation history.
I'm just trying to guess who the first most metal bear would be.
Most metal bear.
Is it Winnie the Pooh?
No, it is the Winnie the Pooh's not that metal. He is pretty awesome though. It is the grizzly bear or whatever from The Fox and the Hound. That thing is scary. So metal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess so. It's so funny. It's been so long since I've seen that movie, but yeah, that's a pretty terrifying bear.
It's a terrifying bear.
I don't know. You don't think Winnie the Pooh is a metal bear? I mean, his commitment to a philosophy of
Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah,
Winnie the Pooh is not metal. He's not like heavy metal. Like you know, the first thing that comes to my mind when I see Winnie the Pooh is Xi Jinping. I mean, it's honey and being comfy and
yeah.
Have you? Okay, I just got a little political.
Just on a random tangent. Have you read a book called The Tao of Pooh?
No.
It's a great book. I just recently reread it. Basically, I'm not sure how much of it is a serious. How much of it is he's actually making a serious point of like Winnie the Pooh represents Taoism, because it's also kind of funny, but it makes some very compelling points of like how Winnie the Pooh embodies Taoism.
Hey man, if I can argue that the Grinch is actually the good guy, even from the beginning, at least from his perspective and from my perspective, I can argue that the Grinch is actually the good guy with those 3 steps of why he's my hero. You can argue why Winnie the Pooh embodies Taoism. For sure.
Oh, exactly. You know what? Maybe you should write that book.
Well, how the Grinch is actually the hero.
How the Grinch is actually the hero.
I would, but I'm pretty sure Dr. Seuss estate still owns the Grinch. Because I want to write a Grinch musical.
Oh, right.
Well, I want Danny Elfman to write it. Anyway, we're getting way off topic.
Brave. Anyway, yeah, so Mor'du, I felt was not necessarily the best addition to the story. Cool. Some great scenes because of him being there, but I just felt like was not. And I felt the same way, I hate to say it, to some extent about the witch. I think that you needed that character, but she was really just there to provide the spell. And if you look at stories where that character works, I'm thinking, actually the one film I was thinking of was Little Mermaid. You've got Ursula, who effectively does the same thing, but she has an ulterior motive in that she uses it to actually propel herself to power. And I think in order to really justify the witch, or to really make it land, that witch needs to actually have an objective that goes beyond just, I have a business where I give spells to people.
And carve wood.
Yeah.
As
funny as it was.
It doesn't even necessarily need to be like that the witch is evil, like the way it is with Ursula. Or maybe like it could even just be much more benevolent, like she's trying to teach Merida a lesson.
Exactly. Like there's
some kind of guardian character, or even like an ancestor character, because the Scottish people, I think, have a lot of that kind of lore anyway.
Exactly. So anyway, those are kind of but overall, I mean, I really do enjoy this movie. I do think it is. I do think it is a great movie.
I think in execution, it's so funny that the problems with theming or story structure are easily forgivable, if not unnoticeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I maybe struggled with it a little bit at the beginning, because I really enjoyed watching this. Well, so what was it? But there was that feeling of like, but I feel like there's just
something there that just doesn't quite
work.
Yeah.
It doesn't land the same way as something like Inside Out, where you get to the end of that movie and you're like, oh, all of these things are layered and connect, and it just weaves together so perfectly.
Yeah.
And it speaks about like really heady concepts, like heavy concepts even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inside Out is I don't know if it's my favorite Pixar movie, but it is so thoughtful. Like the way that they like distill very complex ideas about brain function, cognitive function, behavior, psychology, and also a little bit of like physiology. Mm-hmm. And they sort of just like boil that down into still very high concept. Like you can go deep, but well enough that it can be understood by a child. Exactly.
And the whole conclusion, like the whole thing that the characters realize is like, oh, sadness is not a bad thing. Like to communicate that in that world and to have that really hit home like that, that's just like, and then of course you've got all those other layers on top of it as well. Yeah, like that. I agree. It's. I don't know if it's my favorite Pixar, but to me, it's an example of like, if you're going to explore a theme, that's how you do it. That's how
you got to be smart about it. Yeah,
that movie does it in a way that's.
Now that movie is not as funny as this movie.
I would agree. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think this movie is funnier, and I think that's why oftentimes people are like, people still talk about Brave. It's hilarious. I wish we would get like more Brave. I just want to listen to Kelly MacDonald talk all the time because I just love her. So yeah, I think we should get into it.
Okay, cool. Well, why don't you go? Why don't you start us off?
Sure. So actually, a lot of mine doesn't. I want to throw this out there. A lot of mine doesn't change. So unless I explicitly say there's a difference in the movie, just imagine that it's the way the movie we got.
Okay.
So in the beginning, when Merida is a young girl, she's playing with her mom, but then she's introduced to an older woman. Not older woman, an older girl and by older I mean she's just slightly older than Merida. And this is, they're like, oh, this is going to be your handmaid because, the queen can't look after you all the time. So they're going to have introduce somebody who's close to your age. And so Merida's kind of shy and she gets introduced. And this girl's name is Ailey, but it's spelled like the classic Gaelic way. Elidh, I think is how you spell it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Ailey. Anyway. I went to school with a girl who spelled it that way.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I think I misspelled it, but like Ailey. So then the bear thing can happen with Mordu, that's fine. So in the scenes where Merida is like, it's like a montage where Merida is being scolded by her mom and telling her like how to do things, where she's like, time went on and I became a brother to three, or I became an older sister to three brothers. They get away with everything. Or they get away with murder. I never get away with anything. And so during that whole montage, we see Ailey is also there. Like, she's also always by Merida's side, like, or helping or whatever. And we see the two of them are like snicker when Eleanor like messes up or stuff like that. So they have more than just a working relationship. And on the day when they have their day off, like Merida has her day off where she's like, every so often there's a day where I can do whatever I want, a day where I can change my fate. I don't know if you know this, but I really like this movie. Anyway, so Merida and Ailey go out together and do all the archery stuff, and it's clearly like they get along really, really well. And even though Ailey is slightly older, like, she still wants to hang out with Merida. So when they finally come back and Merida's like, oh, we did all this cool stuff, we can see the two of them are walking into the dining hall together. and the queen immediately is like, okay, sit down, Merida, and then she like dismisses Ailey. She's like, okay, that's enough. And Ailey, like, Merida doesn't want Ailey to go, but Ailey has to obey the queen, so she wanders off, much to Merida's dismay. Then they have the whole scene where they're getting married, or that all the Lord's sons have accepted, and they're gonna pick who's gonna be the queen, or pick who Merida's gonna marry, and that's all the same. And then the next day, whenever it is, when Eleanor is helping Merida get ready, it's actually Ailey who's dressing her, and sort of Eleanor is just dictating, I guess, to her, so that's fine. Then the same thing happens. The clans show up. They can have their fun times because that's hilarious, and I love the lords and the lords' sons. I think they're so funny. Merida picks archery, and she competes for her own hand the same way. When Merida wins, her mother is furious about her breaking tradition. When Merida wins, her mother's not furious about her breaking tradition, as technically she didn't break any rules. The firstborn is allowed to compete. But like, she's furious that Merida says she doesn't want to marry any of the lords. Merida basically is like, I don't want to marry any of the lords, which is breaking tradition. It's not the fact that she couldn't compete. That's what's breaking traditions. But she says, I don't love any of them. And then Merida and her mom argue. Merida leaves and goes to see the witch. That's fine. While she's gone, Eleanor is trying to find Merida. But Ailey wants to cover for Merida. So Merida goes to leave. She's like, I'm leaving. Like, I'm going somewhere. I just need to ride my horse. And she's like, make sure my mother doesn't find out, like, I've gone missing. She tells Ailey. And Ailey's like, fine. So Ailey employs Hubert, Hamish, and Harris to try and come up with shenanigans to stop Eleanor from finding out that Merida's missing. Meanwhile, the clan lords are waiting. They're basically, like, arguing amongst each other. And they're talking about how, like, matters of marriage or conflict are solved in their clan. So like they're arguing amongst each other. Each one of them has their own traditions, and they keep like belittling the other's traditions, saying like, "Oh no, your tradition's stupid. We do it this way." No, that's stupid. Why would you do that? We do it this way. And that's what's going on back at the castle. Merida returns, has her mother eat the cake, and now she's a bear, and they go back to the witch. Meanwhile, back at the castle again, Hubert, Hamish, and Harris have turned into little bears, and Ailey does her best to try and like rein them in and keep them hidden, but the three lords' sons find out, and Ailey manages to convince the lords' sons to that these are just the three princes. Just the three princes, and she gets them. She gets the lords' sons on her side to try and stop them from, stop their fathers from figuring out that there are bears in the castle. While they're traveling, Eleanor and Merida have a heart-to-heart, and Merida explains that when they go back, she still doesn't want to get married. She wants to turn her mother back into a human, but she still doesn't want to get married. And that she's not like her mother, which is, by the way, the second time in the movie that she says, "I'm not like you." Eleanor intonates in bear that Merida has never been in love, so how would she like know what that feels like? And Merida starts to explain the feeling of what love is like. But she sort of stumbles over her words, and then she diverts to a different line of thought and talks about how the way that Eleanor, her mother, and Fergus are, the way that they are together, that's what she wants to be like with someone. And that her mother was lucky that she fell in love, and Merida wants to find that with someone. So then they find the Old Kingdom and learn how to mend the bond, and that's fine. They make their way back to the castle. That all plays out, but now with Ailey and the Hubert, Hamish, and Harris, and the Lord's sons are all helping. So more crazy shenanigans. When there's the scene where Merida is distracting the lords so Eleanor can make her way up the stairs without them noticing that there's a bear in the castle. Mm-hmm. So that scene is a little different. Instead, Merida is struggling to like tell a story to hold on to their attention until Ailey sort of comes in to her rescue, and the two of them then begin to reenact the story of the ancient kingdom, and they're like playing off of each other and like acting it out. And Eleanor is sneaking up the stairs, But then she stops at the top of the stairs to watch Merida and Ailey tell the story. This proves, like thematically, this proves that Merida does actually listen to what Eleanor says. And she sees, so the two girls describe how the differences of the clan members, it's the differences of the clan members that make them unique. And when united, these differences actually wound up saving the Scots from the Vikings, from the invaders. So it's easy to fight over our differences, but it is better to understand that people are different, and that makes us stronger because we can learn to use those differences, not to try and make others do things our way just because that's what we know. You on board?
Yeah, okay. I like where you're going with this.
So then the fight with Mordieu happens. That's fine. Mordieu. I don't know how to spell it.
Mordieu.
So Merida mends the tapestry, and she hangs it on her mother, but it doesn't work. It just straight up doesn't work. And so her mother, finally she tells her mother that she's sorry for trying to change her. She tried to change her mother with a spell, which was exactly what she felt like Eleanor was trying to do with her. Trying to change her into be what she wanted. And so, Merida is like, I was trying to change you the way that you were trying to change me. I just did it with a spell, whereas you were trying to force me into something. And that's not okay. Like, we can't change people just because we're different. This is the real bond that is fixed.
Right.
So it was never the tapestry in the first place. It was the bond between the two of them because they were trying to change each other. So Eleanor transforms back to normal, and the ending all plays out the same.
Nice.
So, yeah, the biggest difference that I wanted to try and do was fix the narrative dissonance between pride and Merida standing up for what she wants. So in this one, the problem, the narrative is now change. It's we have to, just because people are different, we have to accept them for who they are. We shouldn't try to change them. I also, and this was like kind of under the surface, I really wanted to have Ailey as a new character, to have another female character, and to do more with the characters back at the castle. I felt like Hubert, Hamish, and Harris were fun. But at the end, we sort of get the Lord's sons kind of like talk about stuff. Like they're like, she's absolutely right. Like we should be able to do what we want. And then little Dingwall is like, oh, I never wanted her. It was you're the one who picked her. You know what I mean? Like,
but she's a princess.
I felt like there was more there to those characters. So I kind of wanted to explore the Lord's sons a little bit. So I gave Ailey, I created Ailey to do that. I also, and this is like super subtle, because I wanted to do it through framing, I basically wanted Merida, at least up to interpretation, to be homosexual. So the reason she doesn't want to get married could either be up to your interpretation, and you could do this through framing, how they frame Ailey and Merida together whenever they're together, is it could be, again, up for interpretation. That's the way I wanted to leave it, because it's a Disney movie, and I don't think you can come right out and do this, but at least not as a main character. Where Merida doesn't want to get married because she's never, or she wants to fall in love. And the scene with her mother when they're having a heart-to-heart and she's like, oh, you've never been in love? I kind of wanted to have Merida basically describe what being in love is like, because she's already in love with Ailey.
Oh, that's an interesting detail. Oh, that's that's
so,
really smart.
And that's why I wanted to talk about change. Like she wants her mother to accept her for who she is, talking about, lesbian, homosexuality, but she's afraid to like say it explicitly. And I did this on two levels. One, because it's still a Disney movie. And also, I mean, like I think Merida's not my character. Like I didn't come up with her, but I think that why not have like a openly gay princess? But in those times also, it wouldn't have been acceptable to be that way. So what Merida is trying to do is, and the theme is all about accepting people for who they are. That makes them stronger. And so under the surface, like, if you're paying attention, you would see that Merida is actually already in love with Ailey. The way that they light up around each other, the way that she describes being in love, but then quickly changes direction to talk about her mother and her father to try and cover up the fact that she's been describing how she feels about Ailey. And then the fact that, like, we shouldn't want to change people just because they disagree with us. But anyway, that was sort of, I don't know. I feel weird about it because I think it's fine to have an openly gay character, in a story, but I also feel like you need to be sensitive to the time. Like, it's still like, you know, what, I don't even know, 16th century Scotland, probably before that. And you know, there was never any indication as to what Merida's sexuality was in the original movie. And I think being subtle about it means that it doesn't matter if Merida is or isn't. The point is that she wants to fall in love, and that should be her choice, whether that's male or female. Anyway,
I don't know. I like that layer to it. Actually, that's a really cool way to blend them together. I should have gone first. Your pitch was way better than mine.
Hey man, now you know how I feel sometimes. When we first started doing this, because you're a filmmaker, right? When we first started doing this, there were some pitches that I threw out that yours were way better. I'm thinking in particular your iRobot pitch.
Oh, okay.
Your iRobot pitch. I think you went after me. I don't know. It's been 2 years since we did iRobot. That pitch, you fucking nailed that pitch, and I was like, oh shit. And you've done that a couple times. Sometimes you'll be like, I told the same story, but I told it from this character's perspective. And immediately I'll go, oh, that changes everything. Yeah.
Oh, well, you got it this time.
Well, I'm still curious because even if your pitch isn't, I mean, you say that your pitch isn't as good as mine. Even if your pitch isn't as good as mine, it doesn't mean there's still not some like thematic or philosophical detail that isn't profound.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you managed to do, the one I was listening to yours, what I actually realized, you put it into words that I hadn't really thought of, but this whole like needing to change somebody else, and that we should accept people as they are. That's actually, it's almost like this is the movie. It's like the movie screams, this is what it should have actually been about. Yeah. And that's how, because it's like, oh, you're making a movie about pride. Okay, but what are you saying about pride? But putting it in those terms, it actually makes it so there's actually more of there's a specific action that's attributed to it that I think actually what you've done incorporating it into a story makes it, it rings more true, and it also has more relevance, and it has a bit more weight to it, I think, which I thought was a really smart thing.
With that layer that I added about Alien Merida potentially being in love is also, you know, that's also the change. Like we often talk about acceptance. We need to accept others. So even though I was like, I want to leave that up to interpretation, explicit, like in my head canon, they are. But I wanted to leave it up to interpretation because then it's like, oh, we should accept everyone for who they are. But also, if you read it that way, then it's like there's another layer of accepting people for who they love, which I think is quite poignant in today's society. Yeah, exactly.
No, nicely done, and it's amazing. Yeah, you managed. There was not a lot that you changed either, but yeah.
I introduced a whole new character,
but I mean, it was less significant changes than mine. I've actually just removed. There are some characters that I actually effectively removed, but I'll get into my pitch. So. Before I get into my pitch, so one thing actually that I actually did want to talk about, just very briefly, there's a really great behind-the-scene video on Toy Story 3 where Michael Arndt, who was the screenwriter of Toy Story 3, talks about what he learned writing a Pixar movie. Now, his background, he wrote the screenplay for Little Miss Sunshine, and that's what basically got him in as a writer in Hollywood, and then Pixar hired him to write Toy Story 3, and he was having some trouble figuring it out at one point. So he went back and we watched Toy Story, The Incredibles, and Finding Nemo, and he basically says these are the key things that you need, or at least for the structure in some of the Pixar movies that come up in the first 25 pages that really set the story in motion. And I'll just run through them quickly. Basically, you have a character, you introduce them doing what it is they love the most, but then they have a flaw that comes out of the thing that they love the most. Then there's storm clouds on the horizon. So in the case of Toy Story, it's Andy's birthday party's coming up. So there's like something is going to change at some point.
An inciting incident.
Exactly. And then the thing that the character loves the most gets taken away from them. So in Toy Story, the case is there's this toy that shows up who's now replaced him. And then you
Buzz Lightyear.
Exactly, but then you add insult to injury. So in that case, he's not only a toy that's replaced him, he's a complete moron who's not even aware that he's a toy and is not even aware of how big a deal it is. So, and then the character has to make a choice. They can either do the right thing or the wrong thing, and they always have to do the wrong thing, otherwise you have no movie. So in that case, Woody knocks Buzz out the window. And then the rest of the movie, he basically attempts what would be the equivalent of like toy murder, and then has to fix his and then has to go and fix his mistake. But that's what sets up the story. So I went back and I rewatched that, and I tried to sort of use that as a guide for this. And this movie actually, I does think follow it pretty carefully.
Actually, it really does. Now that you've like sort of set that out. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, oh shit, like, I think I did that where the mistake, like the thing that they try to do where they're given the choice of Merida is given the choice of change her mom or not, and she chooses to do it so that the rest of the movie becomes trying to make up for that mistake, which is the crux of the story. Exactly.
So I feel like just structurally, the original movie should have gotten to that point a little sooner.
Yeah, it does take a long time before we actually see what the point of the story is. Because that's, again, like, I felt like, again, that narrative dissonance. I felt like the movie was about standing up for what you want, and Merida is sort of painted as this rebellious figure, when really it's actually about pride. It's about... I mean, it is also about the relationship between a mother and a daughter, but it is about pride. It's about, mend the bond
exactly.
that was torn by pride.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really is what it's about. So in my version, I just took out the voiceover because I actually felt like it wasn't really warranted. It didn't. I love
how
the thing is,
how to change your fate.
But the thing is, it wasn't that like it was really nicely written, really nice. Like it was well written, well delivered voiceover. It didn't tell me anything new. I felt like the images just told, like, oh, okay, I can see she's got brothers, and we can see they're getting into mischief, and we can see that her mother is. There's the scene actually where they're sitting down, and the father's like stuffing his face full of food, and Merida comes in with a plate of cookies that she slides under the table. That scene alone, I felt like actually communicated a lot of the relationship and the dynamics in the family just on
between the whole family. That's one of the best scenes ever, because you can see two of the boys are like dying of boredom, and one of them is like imitating their father perfectly, like mimicking the whole story. Oh fuck, I laughed so hard at that. But you're right, like you sort of get the dynamics immediately where like Fergus is sort of narrating to an empty room. Like he doesn't care who's listening, he just wants to tell the story.
Yeah.
And then Eleanor, like that whole scene, is really, really well done, because Eleanor scolds both her sons and her daughter at one point in that scene, and that we get the three sons are mischief makers. Merida sort of spoils them. My only, I guess, really problem is we see Merida and Eleanor and Merida and Fergus and Eleanor, but we don't get a lot of Hubert, Hamish, and Harris interacting with anyone beyond their pranks. Like they're not really. They're more like forces of nature than actual characters.
Yeah, exactly. So,
which is fine. It's comedic.
Yeah, exactly. So in my version, it actually starts off with, so it's Merida. She actually doesn't have any younger siblings. She's an only child in my version, and we see at the beginning that she likes doing archery. We established in the beginning that she is an independent person who wants to basically live her own life and make her own choices. But the clouds looming on the horizon is someday you're going to have to be queen, and you're going to have to act like a lady, and you're going to have to do all these things. And so we see that there is tension between her and her mother, but her father acts as sort of like a buffer between the two of them. The inciting incident in mine is that the father actually falls ill. He catches an illness and dies. Yeah,
but Billy Connolly.
I know. That's the thing. I love him, and he was hilarious. But as you said, he doesn't really do a lot, in my opinion, to really drive the story. It's not really about him. It's really about the mother-daughter relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my solution was just to kill him. Anyway, so now that he's died, and one thing I actually would have liked to have done a little bit more was do a bit more research on how some of the Scottish royalty system would have worked. So I'm taking some liberties there, and I'm basically saying that, okay, well, now that the king is dead, his next heir has got to become the ruler of the kingdom, but she has to get married for that to happen. And so this is where that tension comes up. Anyway, so it's leading up to the week, and in my version, there's just one clan, and it's like, you're gonna marry this person, and she's like, I don't want to marry that person. And Merida goes to her. She has a nurse who lives in the castle, who when she was younger told her ghost stories and told her stories about magic, and actually claimed that she knew how to do magic herself. And actually, I had an idea, I don't know how he would have fit this in, but there would be a scene earlier on where she shows Merida this trick that she does.
Well, that's easy enough to do.
Yeah.
As just a shot, like a throwaway shot.
Yeah, exactly. But the idea was to establish early on that there was the potential for some supernatural thing that could happen in this world. Anyway, so she goes to this nurse and says, I don't know what to do. I'm going to get married. I don't want to get married. It's my mom's decision. This is not the life that I want. And the nurse says, what if I could change your mother? What if I could
change your fate? Yeah,
exactly. What if I could change this for you? And what she does is she ends up tricking Merida and says, basically, it's more or less the same, I'm going to make this cake and here, give it to your mother and it will change her. But in my version, the nurse is trying to trick her. The nurse knows this is actually going to do something else. So Merida takes it to her mother, gives it to her. That plays out more or less the same way. How are you feeling? I'm not feeling too well. And then she turns into a bear.
You're a bear.
Anyway, so what happens next is she and her mother basically have to flee, and it's set up in a way where it's played so that by the time they have fled, the nurse shows up and she says, look at this trail of destruction. There was a bear in here and she killed Merida. And she holds up she sets up the scene to make it look like the bear ate Merida. And it's oh no, the king has died, and a bear came in the castle and killed the queen and the princess, and there's no royal family left. So then all the clans, so this is happening back in the castle, all the clans come back together, and basically this nurse, we reveal, is actually a witch, and she's basically manufactured the whole thing so that there's another clan leader who she puts in charge, who she can manipulate.
So she's become now a puppeteer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was the clan leader whose son was supposed to marry Merida. And now he's in charge, but she's effectively the one who's actually in charge.
So this was all a thing from the beginning for her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, Merida and her mother they're out in the wilds, and in my version, the Eleanor can actually speak still. She can actually communicate with words in the beginning, but they're out trying to survive in the wild. They're trying to figure out how they're going to break the spell, and then Eleanor knows of a witch that lives in the forest that they might be able to go to and ask for help. So they go to see this witch, and the witch recognizes Eleanor and says, you're back. I wasn't expecting to see you. Yeah, you'd be turned into a bear. And basically what's revealed in this scene was that the witch actually enabled Eleanor to become queen in the first place.
Oh, shit.
And because Eleanor had fallen in love with who was going to be the king, but there was his mother would not allow him to marry her.
Yeah.
So she went to this witch and asked for this witch to say, like, can you change it so that I can marry him and become queen? But the deal was, your husband will be king for a certain amount of time, and then his time will end.
Oh, damn.
But it was always vague enough that she interpreted it as, oh, okay, well, our heir, he will be replaced by our child.
Yeah.
And so
either Merida or a son or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is why she was so attached to trying to maintain the orders, because she went, I need to make sure that my daughter follows these rules so that when this time comes to an end, she'll actually be able to I can ensure that she's the one who's on the throne and she's the one who's in charge.
Yeah, I'm on board.
And so the witch says, like, okay, the only way you're going to be able to fix this, the only way you're going to be able to turn back into a human, and and she gives him the riddle, and then like disappears. One of those Monty Python
like
Holy
Grail to a live homunculus. No,
exactly. Or I'm thinking of the scene in Holy Grail where he's like, "You'll come to a bridge and across the bridge," and the old man just starts laughing and then disappears.
And it disappears.
Yeah, something like that. But maybe not quite for comedic effect. Anyway, in the meantime, basically...
Actually, I'm just going to interrupt you because I think what might work really well is if they're having the conversation and then they turn around and turn back and they're back in that clearing with the standing stones.
Oh, there you go.
Because I actually think that cutaway works really, really well when you're like, what the... All of a sudden, they're just back in the clearing with the standing stones.
Yeah.
I think that might work really, really well, where it's just like, where did they go?
Yeah, exactly. I actually like that too. So there we go. That's what happens. Anyway, in the meantime, there has been some disagreement between the clans and who has actual rule. So tension is building. So they're at this clearing with the rocks, and they're trying to figure out what did the riddle mean. And there was the scene where they had an argument, and Merida like cuts the tapestry with the sword.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, maybe that's what it was. We got to go back and we've got to fix that. So they go back and they try to sneak into the castle. However, in their attempt to sneak into the castle, they're actually caught by the witch, who's now effectively assumed control.
Different witch, though. Different witch.
The one that was the nurse.
The one that was the nurse, yeah.
At the beginning.
You have two witches, so...
Yeah, so we're back to evil witch. Anyway, they're captured by the nurse / witch, and the who captures Eleanor, the bear, and the way it plays out is Merida actually is not able to actually get back into the castle, and she has to run. Like she can't go back into the castle because... Oh, I missed a bit. The witch actually hired an assassin to kill her.
Oh, nice.
So Merida's actually got to go on the run.
Yeah.
Because the witch is aware of, like, if Merida shows up, then her whole plan is bust.
Yeah.
Because she's the heir. So she's actually sent an assassin to kill her. So in the process, they capture Eleanor the bear and take her back to the castle, but Merida runs off. However, she's got the tapestry, and by now she's fixed it. But her mom is still a bear. So that hasn't actually fixed it. And so she's wandering in the woods, and she comes upon this witch again. So she's talking to the witch, and the witch is like, and she's saying, like, I don't know what happened. I thought what we were supposed to do was fix this tapestry, and that would put things back to normal. And then the witch starts quizzing her, like, well, isn't this what you wanted? Like, you can go live your life now. You can go and you can live independently. You don't have anything you have to answer. You have no responsibility. And Merida goes like, yeah, but I feel like I'm missing something. Like I'm not happy with this. And so then she realizes, like, oh, like I wanted independence. I wanted to be able to make my own choices, but I loved my family, and it wasn't that I didn't want to be free from them, to break ties with them. It's that I just wanted them to accept me for who I was. And the witch says, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And then Merida says, like, well, I guess I've got to go. Well, I've got to go and rescue my mom. Even if she is a bear, I still don't want to live without her. So I have to go rescue her. So she goes back to go and rescue her. Meanwhile, there's a scene with the nurse talking to Eleanor. And this is all happening at night because Eleanor can still speak English.
Yeah.
So the nurse has done it in a way where she's like kept off in an area because otherwise Eleanor could be like, "Hey, I'm the queen," and speak. But the nurse is keeping her in a secret space and saying like, basically saying, "Tomorrow we're gonna eat you." But the nurse says, "I know what you did. I know that you're not supposed to be queen, and I know that you made a deal with a witch in the forest." And so this is payback because I also wanted to be queen.
Bitch.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Merida comes back, and before she can get into the castle and actually tell everybody what's going on, she's caught by the assassin and brought right to the nurse. And by this point, Eleanor is starting to go a little crazy. She's starting to go in and out of being human bear
mode,
bear mode. And the nurse says like, okay, well, we'll throw her in with her mother and we'll let the bear eat her. And so she's thrown into this bear pit basically, and the nurse is watching.
Well, that's poetic justice.
Yeah. And then the scene plays out more or less the same, and basically it's like, but you draw it out a little bit longer and you actually think Eleanor might eat her, and then Merida does the same apology and is like, I'm sorry, I never valued our relationship, that you were always there for me. And then she changes back.
Yeah.
And then when she's changed back, I meant to plant this seed earlier in the story that like she has this voice that like anywhere you can hear it. She's this Eleanor's this very commanding voice, and everywhere in the castle you will hear it. And so she turns back into a human, and she just like, she shouts.
But if she was a bear, could she not use it as a bear?
Oh yeah, that is a loophole.
Sorry.
That's a good point. Okay, maybe that doesn't work. There are some specifics that need to be tweaked here. But basically, she's able to turn back into a human, and they're able to get, like, people go, oh, it's her, and this witch tricked us. And they then have to, basically, I had written here that they actually get the other clans together, and they basically take the kingdom back.
Burn the witch.
And then the story ends with the queen, like Eleanor stays queen, and Merida rules with her.
Cool.
Yeah, that's why.
I mean, as you said, there was like some problematic stuff in there. What with potential loopholes.
Yeah.
But what I did like is the whole thing where like Eleanor used a spell the same kind of way that Merida was using a spell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are some problems in terms of like who's getting punished for what in terms of pride. Like, like it seems like Merida's getting punished and Eleanor's getting punished for Merida's decision, but nobody's getting punished for the decision that Eleanor made when she was trying to get queen the first time around.
Right. We'll see. Like, yeah, that's the bit that I needed to work out.
Yeah. I can see what you were going for. It like as far as a rough first pitch goes, I could work with that.
Okay, yeah.
Like I could repitch your pitch.
Okay, awesome.
Like there's something there, and that's really the point of CineCasters. I think that's a good enough pitch. It's workable.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the idea I was working for was Eleanor is effectively suffering from her own choice because it may be loose, but she's now turned into a bear. So she's actually like. The whole deal that she made was that thinking that that one of her heirs would become and then now this isn't happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think it was bad. I think the real issue is that so before I wrote my pitch, I was really struggling with what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Like I've often said this, like I find that writing is thinking. Like sometimes I'll just start my pitch and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, I had this idea all along. It was in me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wanted to introduce another character, and I knew I wanted to play around with Merida's sexuality, But then, like, it just kind of poured out of me. But when I first watched the movie, I was like, oh, crap, I don't know what I'm going to pitch for this one.
Yeah, same.
It wasn't until I started writing that I discovered that I really think there was this narrative dissonance between standing up for what you believe in and who you are and pride.
Mm-hmm.
Because... So I think, like, I don't blame you. I think my pitch could even still be better. So, and you know, everyone's got bad ones. I have some terrible pitches. So, yeah, and not even that yours was bad. It's workable. It's workable.
Thank you. I mean, I feel like
I do actually think that doing more with, like, the witches would have been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do sometimes think that fairy tales, and they do this effectively for a reason, but I do sometimes think that fairy tales are often like, oh, a witch or a fairy godmother or some kind of magical being will do something. Mm-hmm. So there's a touch of magic in the world. But then it's like, okay, but, like, if there's magic in the world, what isn't possible?
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, the limitations become almost more fascinating and almost more dubious or complex depending on how they're added. So I'm thinking of for instance, the fairy godmother can change all these animals and pumpkins into carriages and make Cinderella beautiful, but only until midnight. Like, what's up with that? Like, what's so special about midnight? Like, why is it arbitrary? Is there, like, what's the backstory behind that? You know what I mean? So when you have, like, when you have a witch who's, like, this crafty woodcarver, I mean, they sort of explain her away by being like, she's gone to a festival, which is fine. Like, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is sort of like a cop-out. Like, instead of having it be like, oh, my magic doesn't work that way, it's just like, well, she's gone. She's moved. Because, I mean, it is Merida who causes her to move because she basically buys all of her stock. Mm-hmm. Which gets answered at the end when all the...
With the things they show. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Which is a great gag.
Yeah.
But I do think that what your movie pitch does is try to reconcile this idea of, like, well, let's actually have the witches be a main, and you have two of them, a main part of the story. A main part. So magic is real and it's a part of the story. Like, wouldn't it be interesting too if instead of using the clan lord as a puppet, like, politically, she was actually using magic as well, like, just doing more with the magic of the world, you know, because you have witches.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if I was to have taken another stab at it, I would have gotten a little bit more into the specifics of what the rules are. Because I think one of the things that I was trying to get towards is, like, okay, if you mess with reality, there's consequences to that. So like in order to like cause magic, you have, I mean, this basically Full Metal. In order to get something, you have to give something up, like, of equal value. Exactly.
Yeah, that's the rules of alchemy from Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've never watched it, but
it's my favorite TV show.
But I feel like that does come up quite a bit whenever there's a supernatural element involved. You will hear that, like, oh, there's got to be a one-to-one transaction.
A one-to-one, like every time you use magic for your end, you have to give something up,
right?
Depending on what that is,
or like have to be Infinity personal, War does that.
Yeah.
With Thanos, he's got to make a sacrifice to get this one Infinity Stone,
the Soul Stone. I don't know. I've never seen it.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay.
I have so much superhero franchise.
I was luckily vague enough that I didn't spoil anything for you. I hope
it's okay. I'm not going to watch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I gotta say, I think Infinity War is actually is an interesting movie because the bad guy is the protagonist.
Is the protagonist? Yes, I've heard that as well. Which is an interesting way to do that. Not the first time that's happened, but that's an interesting way to do that. Where the story is sort of told from his perspective. Yeah,
exactly.
I just have so much franchise fatigue around superheroes in general.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I watched it because my sister and brother-in-law were going to go watch Endgame, and I was like, well, I got to get caught up now.
Yeah. Any last-minute thoughts about Brave?
No, I mean, I enjoyed it as it was. I just think it was a fun exercise for me to be like, okay, I like this, but what's not landing, and try to pinpoint what that was. And actually, it was cool that it was actually very affirming that both of us sort of were able to pinpoint the same thing that was irking us. We found different ways of trying to manage it. Yeah.
I actually think this is one of my better pitches.
It was. I thought it was.
And I actually, because I tried not to change as much as possible because I found all the characters hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I tried to do was basically introduce a consistent theme, and then I did play around with Merida's identity in terms of like who she loves or what she loves, and I think that plays into the message perfectly. So this is one of my better pitches. It's going in my saved pitches folder.
I think it deserves to go there. Yeah,
yeah. And I know there's no sequel to Brave, so like it's not like when we do Jurassic Park where it's like, oh, I can pitch this one. But if we were to ever do that episode we've been talking about where we go back over some of our better pitches, this one's definitely going to be in there.
Nice. Yeah. I think it was a good one for you too. What was so interesting to me was you managed to, without changing too much, actually fix what was a problem with the story.
It's so weird to think that like I didn't actually change. I mean, yeah, you said it. I didn't really actually change that much with the story. I just introduced a new character and switched a couple things around. Mm-hmm. But I really think the characters are so well written and they're so funny that I didn't want to change that much. But there was some problems that needed to be.
Yeah. And because the way I went about it, I tried to like, okay, well, which characters do we need, and tried to just go like, well, we only need this one, this one, this one, and this one.
Yeah.
And then introduce.
I do also think that you. I do also think that you had an interesting way of going about it in terms of like the Pixar narrative structure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my starting point, at least. Yeah.
And I mean, I have a lot of respect for Pixar as a company in general because I can't remember what the guy's name is. He's the CEO of Pixar. What's his name?
Ed Catmull?
No.
John Lasseter.
John Lasseter. Actually, the reason that CineMasters became a thing was because of one of the things that John Lasseter encourages his team to do. He says, if you don't like the way a movie goes, try rewriting it yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason where I was like, oh crap, like, oh shit. That's something that I would like to do just as an exercise, and thus CineMasters was born.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Pixar's been a big influence on me from the beginning, actually.
Yeah, me too, kind of. Like, some of my favorite... Well, one of my all-time favorite movies is a Pixar movie, and that's The Incredibles.
Oh, man, same here. I wouldn't say it's my number one favorite, but it's... I mean, they're all great, but that especially...
That's my number one favorite Pixar.
It's my favorite... I would say it's the one I maybe enjoy watching the most. But my favorite is WALL-E.
I like WALL-E for certain reasons, but, I mean, for me, when it comes to... At the end of the day... It's Pixar. It's got to be, when it's Pixar, it's got to be The Incredibles.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think the clincher is actually the soundtrack. And I know that's biased because I'm a music student and a musician. But the clincher for me in terms of best movies is often the soundtrack.
Oh, yeah. No, I get it.
Michael Giacchino just fucking kills that movie.
Oh, yeah. No, he's a very talented composer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else to say.
I don't think so either. I think, well, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find my band, Robot Philosopher, on Facebook and YouTube and wherever you listen to awesome music, such as iTunes or Spotify, or I think there's one called Deezer, if you're in whatever. But anyway,
I've never used it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah. And I don't do any other social media, so have a listen to that. Oh, I will say that I also started posting sort of video essays on our CineMasters channel, so stay tuned for those. They're pretty cool. One came out, I guess when you guys listen to this, it'll be Tuesday. So one came out last week.
Nice.
So yeah.
I actually didn't even know that. I'm going to go watch it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. The editing needs some work, but it was my first video, and I'm proud of the way it turned out, even though I'm still learning. So
awesome. Oh, that's cool. I'm looking forward to watching it. And you can find me online at Draper Nate on Letterboxd or Nate Draper on Twitter. Anything else? I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Stay safe out there.
Yeah, stay safe. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.
Peace.